Hello and welcome everyone, we Weeb online, and today I'm gonna start a new movie, What If Naruto Went Back in Time to the Day He Was Born, Part 1. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and to watch more videos like this, subscribe to my channel and turn that bell notification on so you never miss an upload. Now wasting no more time, let's begin.
I guess this is where we say farewell, Kurama remarked, flicking his tails carelessly. The huge fox sighed deeply as Naruto sniffled and began to cry. Stop that. It was a long trip, but I don't regret anything now, not being sealed in you, not being your partner, not even this parting. Kurama, Naruto sobbed unashamedly. Me, too. I'd do it all over again. I suppose I have one regret, Kurama reflected. I should have told you sooner, Naruto. It was my fault you grew up alone, and I'm sorry. If there's one thing I'd alter, it's that. Kurama would quickly have another regret. The mental space surrounding them had flared white, and neither of them recalled anything else. In terms of that timeline, Kurama would come to regret those statements, even if he would never confess that ending up 16 years in the past was most likely partly his fault. Given that the last thing Kurama recalled was saying his goodbyes to Naruto, who was going to become one with the other Biju, he was naturally perplexed to find himself under a clear night sky, completely free, and, indeed, with both parts. Also, right in the middle of Konoha, which seems to have been recently devastated, most likely by him. It's that night, Kurama observed, wisely nodding to himself. It was his first time unexpectedly ending up 16 years in the past. That was strange even for a Biju. But, on the other hand, everything about Naruto had been bizarre, so why not this? The mob of Konoha shinobi gathered around Kurama entirely overlooked his relationship and quick shift in alignment, attacking him with another wave of explosive notes. Kurama wasn't bothered. After all, he'd taken Naruto's treasured Rasen Shuriken to the face, but it was still annoying, and his enormous eyes narrowed dangerously. Cut that out, you worms, yelled Kurama. Most of the shinobi were knocked off their feet by the force of his voice alone. But it was the shock of hearing the Biju speak that caused them to freeze for several long moments. Sarutobi hesitated before he could use Enma's staff form to push the Kyuubi out of the settlement. When the Biju singled him out and locked its crimson gaze on him, he flinched. You, monkey old man, Kurama replied angrily, his tone agitated but surprisingly calm for a Biju. To the humans surrounding him, it still sounded like thunder. Seek out your other dumb leader. Before he does something dumb, Kurama subconsciously added, no matter what Naruto thinks, if he drops that big toad on me again, I'm biting off an arm. Minato, exclaimed Sarutobi. His entire ninja career had not prepared him for this. What are you after, you monster? Kurama, whether reformed or not, couldn't let that go. Watch how you address me, old man. I'm going to rip your wrinkled hide to bits, he yelled. Given that Kurama had instantly taken to addressing him by Naruto's friendly Jiji, it was a rather hollow threat. He didn't even want to think about how bothersome Naruto would be if Kurama really did injure the old monkey. Go find your other stupid leader. There's no need for that, Minato replied calmly as he appeared beside Sarutobi. I've arrived, Kurama inquired. Did you get him? Even though he knew Minato hadn't, Kurama held out some hope for a favorable response. After all, Naruto would never do such a thing. There would be many impassioned talks and emotional revelations, and they would eventually become friends, which was fine, but not as satisfying as a good old-fashioned revenge killing. No, he escaped, Minato frowned. Pathetic, Kurama concluded. He immediately moved on before Minato could ask any inquiries. But since you liberated me from that man's influence, I've felt a certain degree of thankfulness. A clear lie. Kurama had felt nothing of the sort and wasn't feeling it much now, but it was a convenient excuse. Minato murmured, pausing, as if unsure how to proceed. It had already been a long night, and it showed no indications of finishing. What man? Sarutobi asked Minato, wonderfully recovering and launching himself into damage control mode. If his years as the Sanin's teacher had taught him anything, it was how to accept crazy, insane situations and begin dealing with the aftermath. There was a masked man who summoned the Kyuubi to Konoha after seizing control of it. I destroyed his control and Minato continued in a rambling manner that revealed his own perplexity. He made an abstract motion to represent their complete current position. If he escaped, he may return at any time, Sarutobi remarked, ignoring all the non-threatening details. What are our options? I only know of one solution, Minato explained. In order to seal the Biju. To put it another way, make a fresh Jinchuriki. Excellent, we're right on track, Kurama said to himself, nodding. Get on it, he said, causing the two Hokage to jump. They seemed to have forgotten about him. I'll wait over there, and if you try to summon the Shinigami, I'll gut you before the third hand seal. Minato suffocated. How do you know about that? He pondered, shaking his head hastily. I'm not aware of any other seal capable of containing, you. Then ask someone who understands a lot about seals, Biju and Jinchuriki, Kurama advised. For example, the successor to that tree man's wife, he said dryly, for this was, after all, Naruto's progenitor. Kurama was going to add something extra, you know, the redhead, the one who knows everything about Jinchuriki, from personal experience, because Naruto definitely wouldn't have grasped it unless it was explained in full, when Minato abruptly paled. Yes, he replied, slightly strangled. I know exactly who to ask, and I'll go do that while you wait. Then he vanished. To the contrary, Kurama leapt out of the hamlet in a single, long bound, leaving the assembled shinobi stunned. Minato's quick departure had a straightforward explanation. Kushina was going to kill him. He had no doubt she was already awake and irritated. Minato, on the other hand, has never won a single argument with her. Kushina, in his opinion, had never lost a combat. Kushina was like a natural force. Biwako claimed that a guy couldn't bear the agony of childbirth. He absolutely believed her. Anything that put Kushina under such duress had to be feared. Kushina had been put through that, as well as having the Kyuubi extracted, and then left alone to wonder about what was going on. She was going to bite the head off the first poor fool she saw. Minato would be the unhappy recipient, who was going to ask her how to seal a Biju in their son now. When Minato teleported into the safe home where he had left Kushina and Naruto, he was well prepared to face death. The Shinigami, he was convinced, would have nothing on her. Had she gone, Minato's eyes, which had been clamped tight in fear, sprung open in response to that disturbing but all too real possibility. But, instead, Kushina was seated on the bed where he had left her, softly caressing their son. Her eyes were filled with murder, but she had a beautiful grin on her lips. It was really disturbing, because Kushina had never tried to hide her fury or bloodlust before. Look, Naru-chan, Kushina cooed sweetly, it's daddy, my Natu. Naru-chan has been worrying about you. The staccato of the 3 syllables of his name was like kunai cutting into wood, ever closer. Minato didn't wonder how she knew what a newborn was thinking and feeling, or how a newborn would know to be concerned. If Kushina stated it, it had to be true. Kushina gently angled their son toward Minato, and the baby uttered a quiet squeak and stretched out for him. At the very least, I'll get to hold my kid before I die, Minato thought cheerfully as he accepted Naruto's tiny, blanket-wrapped form. So, Kushina explained, what have you been up to since you abandoned me here? Minato replied, well, the point is, the fantastic Konoha rumor grapevine had made it general knowledge by the time Minato returned that the Kyuubi had attacked because it was controlled by someone, and that person had been fought off by the Yondaime. As a result, everyone could mostly overlook Kurama, who had curled up a ways away from the hamlet, like a new, fuzzy hill. Minato arrived, Kushina in his arms, Naruto in hers. Minato, Kushina, screamed Sarutobi as he approached them. Is it okay for you to be here? You just retrieved a Biju, gave birth. Naruto mewled and waved his small arms as soon as he heard the old man's voice. Kushina turned to face Sarutobi with a scowl reminiscent of Mito at her most irritated. Oh, Sandaime-sama, she commented. Naru-chan is overjoyed to see you, and of course I have to be here as well, otherwise, Minato won't know what to do. Kurama lifted his head and turned to stare directly in their direction, proving his big ears weren't simply for show, or that he could detect the specific kind of fear Kushina caused in the male populace. He grumbled, it's about time. You're sluggish, human. Minato was not frequently accused of this, and you're being incredibly cooperative, Kushina observed as Minato flashed obediently toward the Kyuubi. She looked up at the Biju, apparently unfazed. I despise being controlled more than I despise being sealed, Kurama explained. Kushina said, unconvinced. However, they were in no position to look a gift horse in the mouth. Fine, I'll set up Mito seal, Sam is now for the host. I'm not going in you, Kurama declared emphatically. I despise chains and stakes. Kushina refused to accept responsibility. And I'm not going in that fool either, Kurama continued, snarling at Minato. What if he goes and martyrs himself? I don't want to be sealed and suicidal idiot. Oh, and what do you propose then? Kushina scowled. Kurama claimed to consider it. He knew precisely what he wanted to say, but if he said it, they'd probably refuse on principle, figuring he was after the child or something. Minato opened his lips to respond, only to be silenced by Kushina's look. She already knew what he was about to say, and she had made her feelings known. Baby Naruto selected that exact moment to gurgle joyfully and reach his stubby arms toward Kurama. What? No, Naru-chan. You don't want that. Kushina persuaded him. It's mean and possibly infested with fleas. Mommy will get you a beautiful kitty or dog, okay? Naruto made tenacious clutching gestures toward the Kyuubi. HMPH, I suppose the youngster will do, Kurama remarked, absolutely convincingly. After all, he has your cursed blood. Kushina sent him a glance that said exactly how much she valued his opinion. -33. Naruto cooed, and her face fell apart. Oh, I guess, Kushina said. If that's what you're looking for, Naru-chan. I see. So Naruto can beat even Kushina, Minato thought, satisfiedly nodding to himself. I knew he was exceptional. He can truly achieve anything. That's how Naruto regained his Kyuubi Jinchuriki status. What the hell did you do? Shouted Naruto, his teenage self within his mindscape. I should have asked you, shouted Kurama back. Things like these only happen when you're around. What kind of thing? Ending up in the past, Naruto insisted. He didn't have to worry about lung capacity or sore throats because he wasn't a corporeal person. Because the last thing I remember is you saying how much you regret acting like that the night I was born. And the next thing I know, we're on the night I was born. Now, of all times, you figure out how to think logically, exclaimed Kurama. Naruto glared at him, clearly dissatisfied. The last thing I remember is going to join the other Biju, to become one again, Kurama regretfully revealed. And perhaps, I was thinking about how I hoped I could alter the entire killing your parents thing. They exchanged silent stares. It's not so horrible, Kurama murmured as he turned away and curled up a little. He could already feel a headache approaching. Not awful at all. I'm a baby. I can't even talk. I can't even eat ramen, screamed Naruto. Some things remain constant, but some had already done so. Naruto's first year of his second life was the most vexing experience he'd ever had. As an infant, he was physically incapable of doing a wide range of tasks. Eating solid foods, for example, walking, talking, toilet breaks, standing up, clear vision. Naruto remastered the majority of them within the first year, but it was terrible before that. Hell is boring and degrading. The only bright spot was Naruto's mother and her incredible ability to know what he was feeling and thinking. Not the adolescent time traveler part, but everything else. When he was hungry, bored, wanted to go outside, wanted to throw paint balloons at Danzo, and needed to be held. Okay, so maybe there was another benefit to being held so frequently and carefully. Jiraiya had attempted to make a remark about Naruto never learning to walk because Kushina was always carrying him around. But Naruto replied by barfing over his hair. Jiraiya then just moaned about how much of a mama's boy he was. Kushina always seemed overjoyed about it. However, for the first 6 months, Naruto was unable to do anything but lie down and sleep. He snored a lot, or more accurately, he spent a lot of time in his mindscape. Kurama became bored of him quickly and cravenly tossed Naruto on the other Biju using their special Biju instantaneous, regardless of distance communication system. It came out that the other Biju had also remembered everything. They were enraged and accused Naruto and Kurama jointly. Most of them found it difficult to remember. Their Jinchuriki never listened to them, and they were powerless to act outside of their seals. Even Juuki, who was already friendly with B, was hesitant to tell him about their small time travel trip. Even B, despite his eccentricities, would have difficulty believing that. So Naruto spent his first few months trying to persuade Shukaku to be friendlier to Gaara. Arg, shut up. The Ikubai eventually snapped. He'd lasted a remarkably long time, and already chosen to do it. Shukaku hadn't intended to admit anything, judging by the way he snapped his teeth shut and glowered afterwards. Oh, so you like Gaara, huh? Naruto smiled. Whatever, he's not the worst host, murmured Shukaku. He expressed gratitude to me and attempted to protect me. Yeah, Gaara's pretty amazing. Naruto, the object of Gaara's thanks, said solemnly. I mean, he was so heroic when I saw him in the fight. They both nodded, recalling the man Gaara had the potential to be. Idiots, Kurama grumbled. What did you say? Shouted Shukaku. What do you mean? My host is 100 times better than your brat. Oi, Naruto murmured, half-heartedly. Gaara was pretty cool. He's not mine. Don't turn me into a set with him, Kurama objected. Shukaku, who was now on a roll, ignored them both. Gaara created Cage long before yours, and he'll do it again. You just wait. Naruto couldn't let it go. Fine, you're on, he said. Just wait until I beat Gaara to the hat this time. There was, however, a significant impediment in Naruto's ascension to Hokage. Hokage at the time. Yellow Flash of Konoha, a genius and an inspiring leader. Namikaze Minato, Yondaime. Naruto found his father to be an odd subject. Minato never treated Naruto like a child, whether because he had never spent much time among children, because he was a genius and thus naturally lacking in common sense, or because he was a genius and virtually precognitive in his perceptiveness. Minato spoke to Naruto without using baby talk, and while he couldn't comprehend Naruto immediately like Kushina, he quickly became frighteningly excellent at understanding Naruto's infant body language. Various friends and acquaintances tried to correct Minato and convince him that several-month-old newborns didn't really grasp words yet. They held out some hope that at least one of Naruto's parents could be reasoned with, but Minato merely stared at them politely incomprehensible. Of course Naruto understands me, Minato stated calmly. I knew Naruto was exceptional from the time he was born. He sounded more like a commander reviewing his troops than a doting parent. Naruto didn't see much of Minato. He suspected that if Kushina hadn't seemingly informed Minato at some point that families ate supper together, Minato would be home for dinner every day. Otherwise, it's a no-brainer. Minato diligently returned home every evening, even if he immediately returned to the office after eating. The fact that Kushina's cuisine was simply divine most likely contributed to his motivation. Naruto concluded that Kushina was certainly the smarter of the two. His father had struck gold when he married such a strong, intelligent, and caring woman, though Naruto suspected Kushina was the one who proposed. That sissy Minato appeared pretty clueless about relationships. Naruto, like any good son, made his first word mama. It was the least he could do for his wonderful, magnificent mother. Ramen was his second single. However, being a baby was extremely dull. It seemed about as uninteresting as being locked away. To be honest, Naruto had been somewhat intimidated the first time he encountered the Biju in their shared thought space. It had appeared to be something awe-inspiring, hallowed. Of course, he'd squared his shoulders and glared them down, but he rapidly grew accustomed to it, and sitting next to Kurama at one of their Biju powwows, Kurama had made strangled noises when Naruto first called it that. Became one of the more interesting aspects of his baby existence. Well, he's the reincarnation of the old man's kid. The younger one, Matatabi reasoned. He's almost like a sibling. Kurama grumbled again, but Aisabu, Kokyu, and Shumei agreed. Shukaku accepted as well, purely to spite Kurama. Fu attempted to fly for the first time today. Shumei recounted, his wings buzzing with delight. She slammed into 3 stands and a vegetable patch. Han tried to hit on the innkeeper's daughter, groaned Kokyu. Based on his Jiraiya experience, Naruto inquired, did she slap him? No, Han's quite slick, the Gobai replied dryly. When she tried to caress his chest, she scorched her palm. Why didn't he take off the armor before attempting to obtain some? Naruto questioned. I meant he was slick, not smart, mumbled Kokyu. Roshi burned half his beard off attempting to light his pipe with Uten, Son Goku commiserated. Juuki simply shook his head. There were no words to express B's unique weirdness. Shukaku cackled, shahaha. My host is the best. He's not an idiot. Your host is already 4 months old, Matatabi noted. It's all in the future. Yujito used to be a smart one as well. But now, it's all males with her, and she has no idea what to do with them, so she simply beats them up and then cries when they get upset at her. Puberty. Kurama gave a shaky chuckle. He feared the day Naruto had to go through that for real. I'm sure Gaara is a very adorable baby, Naruto concluded. Shukaku groomed himself. You're cuter, Kurama said casually. When he realized what he had said, he made a concerted effort to buy Judama himself. Aisabu appeared at their usual powwow with an unusually serious expression. Just before Naruto's first birthday, thankfully, by this point, Naruto could walk somewhat reliably and had a vocabulary that included all the most important words. His aim was also quite good, perfect for nailing annoying people in the face with vegetable mush, and then looking innocent. Naruto paused for a moment to consider the ramifications of being able to read the expressions of a big one-eyed turtle. I just reformed, Aisabu said to everyone. And, I don't recall much, but I believe Yagura and that masked man will come after me soon. When his previous, brief host, Kakashi's teammate Rin, died near the end of the Third War, his corporeal form dispersed. Aisabu had finally rebuilt himself in the actual world, landing at the tranquil harbor of a little island in Mizuno Kuni. In the previous timeline, Tobai had approached, entrapped, and locked him there, and Yagura had already been his pawn, used to become Aisabu's vessel, even though he wasn't Mizukage yet. I don't mind going back with Yagura, Aisabu stated. We didn't get to converse much, but I think he was a kind guy. He did appear that way, Naruto admitted. But the masked man, Aisabu was concerned. He has that dreadful Sharingan, and he can control any of us, Kurama grumbled. We're unable to stop him. Shukaku murmured something along the lines of I'm sure you'd know, but soon dropped it when Matatabi bit him and glared. But he doesn't have Shisui's invincible brainwashing, so it's just a pretty strong genjutsu, right? Naruto inquired. and you can beat those if you have a partner. You and Yagura can, interrupt each other's chakra or something. Well, I think you better run. He's very hard to take on. Those Uchihas are such cheaters, he murmured under his breath. Disgusting Sharingan, Kurama agreed. If I recall correctly, Naruto thought, his face screwed up in concentration. One hand on his chin. He can't teleport and be intangible at the same time. Yeah, so if you dive deep, he won't be able to follow. Seiken encouraged. He and Aisabu got along well because they had both been with Kiri for several generations. Aisabu hummed, his tails whipping. All right, he said. I'll give it a shot. You can do it. We're all rooting for you, Naruto exclaimed. Unfortunately, encouraging and somewhat strategic powwows were all they could do to help Aisabu. B had been placed under house arrest again and couldn't have run away to Mizu even if Juuki could persuade him. Gaara was still too young to understand Shukaku, and Naruto couldn't imagine where he would even begin explaining this to his parents. Minato seemed curiously trusting, but not overly so, right? So they waited for news from the Sanbai with various degrees of excitement and trepidation. All right, Aisabu finally said, reappearing in their shared mental space. I believe we're safe for the time being. Here's what happened. The masked man had appeared next to Yagura, but he seemed content to send his puppet off on his own. Aisabu revealed that Yagura's chakra resonated very strongly with the Sanbai, to the point where he could exert some influence over the Biju. That was what qualified him as its Jinchuriki despite being older than others when they took up the burden, as Yagura had indicated. He was already an adult, although a baby-faced one. Tobai had waited to see how his pawn would handle himself, therefore he had stayed back. Aisabu rose slowly out of the bay as Yagura approached, appearing as placid and lulled into complacency as possible. Then Yagura appeared in front of him. Aisabu swallowed him whole and... What? Exclaimed Naruto. You ate him? Aisabu fidgeted uncomfortably. Yes. Is that strange? Yes. Is he alright? Naruto worried. Oh, of course, Aisabu comforted him. Come on, I swallowed you previously, and you were alright, Sun whined. I was just in your mouth, Naruto pointed out. I guess I swallowed you too, Aisabu remarked. Maybe. Oh, yeah, Naruto thought, reflecting back on that moment with Guren and Uyukimaru. We don't eat, and we don't have any organs, Koku added. So swallowing something is more like putting it in a pouch. It's not hazardous at all. More like the opposite way around, Kurama complained. Those two freaks, my terrible stomach. Wait, what do you mean you don't eat? Like, ever? Naruto said, his eyes narrowing shut in disbelief. What about ramen? Are you saying none of you have ever tried ramen? Kurama groaned. What's the point? We don't even have taste buds, Chume pointed out. You shouldn't have gone there, Juuki whispered. It's like B with his rap. It's ramen, Naruto argued. No wonder you're all so ill-tempered, if you've never experienced the wonder of ramen. He looked about to start on another long spiel about his favorite food, religion, but Sun cried, "Aw, shut up. I want to hear how the rest of it goes." Obediently, the rest went silent, allowing Aisabu continue. He had eaten Yagura before Tobai could respond, dove to the bottom of the lagoon, and then out to sea. That's it. Actually, Aisabu said. I'm just sitting there now. I gave Yagura some of my chakra, and I assume it destroyed the genjutsu. But he passed asleep. What should I tell him when he wakes up? You should warn him about the Mizukage being controlled too, Seiken remarked. I've seen him through Utakata. I don't know if it's genjutsu or what, but it's been going on for a long time. Utakata was the Sandaime Mizukage's little nephew. Seiken had been sealed into him early in the conflict, in hopes of generating a strong weapon. The Sandaime was also the one responsible for the Bloody Mist notoriety, and the graduation exam Zabuza had told Naruto about back in Nami no Kuni, and overall a very bad man. That must have been Madara, then, Naruto pointed out. Tobai only began in on this things a little bit back, though Naruto didn't think of it. That point also raised some issues regarding Rin's fate, and the choice to utilize her for Kiri's plot with Aisabu. And maybe the whole event had been a setup by Madara. Should I tell him that I heard it from you? Aisabu thought. Yeah, no need in hiding it, Seiken acknowledged. He probably won't believe you otherwise, Naruto added. You should tell him about Kurama too, and what happened in Konoha, so he knows how deadly Tobai is. So that's how it is, Yagura remarked, once he heard everything. Inside Aisabu turned out to be built of other Aisabas of varied sizes, all layered on top of each other. The one to deliver the explanation was another Aisabu, this one only the size of a typical turtle. Tiny Aisabu bobbed his head. Yeah, so be careful, okay? I'll let you off on the next island, he added. I'm in your debt for rescuing me from that man's genjutsu and for the information, Yagura stated, bowing deeply. It wasn't anything, Isabu mumbled, embarrassed. Having a one-eyed turtle monster, even if it was currently conveniently travel-sized, act like a shy schoolgirl was bizarre. Yagura smiled. It was very good of you, he disagreed, and it taught me something very important. Both of us are vulnerable to that masked guy. Neither of us can stand against him alone. But, if we could support each other, like you did for me, we can at least escape his genjutsu. Isabu waited, frozen in suspense. I hate to go along with anything that man planned, Yagura remarked, but, will you come with me? Will you become my partner? My name is Yagura. My hobby is flower viewing. I like camellias in particular. I hate traitors and being mistaken for a child. My dream is to wash away the bloody history of Kirigakure. Even though I'm only a beginner as Isabu's partner, I will do my best, Yagura said, finishing his introduction with a deep bow. Behind him, Isabu's tails waved happily, the turtle all but humming in delight. Don't sweat it. You've got it. Killer Bee encouraged him. You and your man Sanbai already got the appropriate way to be pals, yeah. That was more dreadful than usual, Juuki groaned. Quit humiliating me. I can't take you anywhere. My first time in this place, I gotta put on my serious look, Bee emphasized. What part of that is serious? Juuki complained. Thank you for your nice remarks, senpai, Yagura said graciously. He's the full opposite of you, Kurama commented to Naruto, off to the side. How did that foolish low-rank turtle luck out so much? Naruto ignored him, gushing over the one-year-old Gaara. The young redhead gladly toddled over to the teenager, who had crouched with wide arms, and began patting his whiskered cheeks. You did it. You're so cool, Gaara-chan. Naruto yelled. Look at you, walking all by yourself. He worked it out himself too, Shukaku said happily. And he can even utilize our sand to grab things. Shoo, Naru, Gaara babbled, clapping his fists together. When Shukaku waved his tail in front of the tiny kid, he pulled himself to his feet and toddled after it. It wasn't his first time playing with the Biju. That's it. I'm bringing you Jito next time. Matatabi yowled. Then you'll see. Mine is the best. Is not, Isabu murmured, while Shukaku yelled something derogatory. It didn't used to be like this. We spent ages without speaking to each other, Kurama moaned, as the Biju began to fight loudly. In some ways, they were just like any other set of siblings. That sounds lonely, Naruto wanted to say, but he knew Kurama would complain, boring. Yes, Kurama confessed, it was. Things had been quite hectic ever since he met Naruto, but they had never been dull. And they weren't lonely anymore either. Notes, whether there is a maximum age for Jinchuriki is a fascinating subject. For a long time, we felt that a newborn was necessary, yet that's clearly wrong. B was at least 5. Yagura says he was an adult when he died. The earliest he may have become a Jinchuriki was shortly after Naruto's birth. So at the time, Yagura would have been, at youngest, 8, but potentially a teenager. Mito, of course, was an adult. The other question involving Jinchuriki is why they die after the Biju is extracted. When teaching Naruto and Wind Chakra, Kakashi comments that Naruto has 4 times as much chakra as he does. Then, he adds that if he didn't have to restrain the Kyuubi's chakra, Naruto would have 100 times more. So the seal takes a lot of chakra to run. This is also the reason why Kushina's seal weakened. Chakra was going to the infant instead of to the seal. Judging by Kurama's flashbacks, the first time Naruto ever used his chakra was during the fight with Mizuki. Kurama clearly emphasizes having to drive his chakra through the cracks in the seal for this. So until that fight, Naruto never used Kurama's chakra at all. So we can probably presume that Jinchuriki don't die because of the lack of the Biju's chakra in their system. They don't use it ordinarily, and if anything, they would have more chakra if they didn't need to keep the seals working. One would presume that it's the trauma of having the seal pulled apart and the Biju hauled out that makes their bodies shut down. Thus, if they don't die straight away, there's a chance they can get cured and recover. That's what occurred with Kushina in this story. She obtained medical treatment, didn't exert herself fighting the Kyuubi, and with her Uzumaki vitality healed quite fine. Well, okay, if this was a serious novel, I would have still murdered her off. But it's a humor piece, therefore she gets to live. Spared by the genre. Being a toddler was an upgrade over being an infant, in that Naruto could now walk, talk, and, most importantly, eat ramen. However, now that Naruto was capable of such acts of independence, Kushina thought it was time for her to return to active duty. Before leaving on every assignment, she sobbed rivers of tears and loudly vowed to murder everyone in a 30-mile radius if her kid had so much as a scratch on him when she returned. Naruto saw her off with a smile. Being snuggled was great, but he was feeling restless. And when the cat was away, when mommy was away, it was time to play. Every time she went on a mission, Kushina sobbed rivers of tears at being apart from her baby boy. After the first expedition, she wasn't the only one crying. It took Naruto's ANBU guards less than an hour to lose him. Kakashi, as squad leader and also as Minato's student, therefore less likely to be murdered, was the one who proceeded to warn their Hokage that his hand-picked, trusted shinobi had failed to watch over his son. Minato didn't get angry as Kakashi expected. He didn't even appear bothered. He'll make a wonderful shinobi if he can already avoid my ANBU, Minato stated, smiling. Minato-sensei, Kakashi began softly, Naruto has disappeared. He knows not to leave the village, and the Censor Corps haven't reported any breaches, Minato said. So there's nothing to worry about. He's not even 2 yet, Kakashi said. What about wild animals, or muggers, or runaway carts? Really, Kakashi? This is Konoha. It's safe, Minato answered, smiling. I'm sure Naruto will turn up in time for dinner. Kakashi wasn't sure what to respond about that, except, you're informing Kushina-san about this, not me. Alright, I don't see why you're so afraid. She won't get furious, it was Naruto's idea, Minato stated gently, already having turned back to his paperwork. Sensei, you're not going to perish on the battlefield. You're going to die because you do something dumb, and your wife eventually kills you, Kakashi thought. Naruto was back when Minato arrived home for dinner. They had instant ramen. Since none of them could cook, well, Naruto knew how, but he couldn't even reach the countertops. Did you have fun today? Minato inquired, between bites. Naruto snickered, somewhat alarmingly. Minato only smiled blandly. By the way, he asked, did you take off the Hurricane formulas I put on you again? Kakashi was getting so riled up, I thought I'd help him, but I couldn't locate you at all. Naruto turned wide, innocent eyes toward his father. Minato didn't believe him for a minute, but he still didn't look concerned either. Keep one on you, he urged. You never know when we might have a breach. Naruto reached out one hand and made a grasping motion. Gimme kunai, he ordered. Despite the fact that Kushina had been very unhappy the times when she caught Naruto playing with his parents' ninja weapons, Minato easily pulled out and handed over one of his tri-pronged kunai. Naruto nodded and pocketed it. I warned you, Jiraiya stated, without an ounce of sympathy. I cautioned about marrying a girl so much like Tsunade. You poor bastard, what did you do? Peek on her in the bath. That was what Jiraiya had done, just before Tsunade almost murdered him. It was a really memorable encounter, and the outcome was rather like Minato's current condition. We're married. I don't need to peek, Minato pointed out calmly, his voice pinched with sorrow. Jiraiya shook his head. He didn't think he had ever seen Minato this injured. There were more bandages than skin visible. In fact, Minato probably hadn't endured this many injuries during the course of the entire battle, combined. Of course, he was also notorious for his quickness and ability to dodge. Insufferable know-it-all, Jiraiya murmured. The community overall seemed unusually indifferent with their Hokage's terrible condition of health, even the shinobi forces. Jiraiya assumed at least the elders would have been there in Minato's hospital room, nagging. But everyone has greater issues. Naruto has somehow managed to replace the sugar next to every coffee machine in the hamlet with salt. All the milk had also mysteriously gone bad, and every left sandal had been exchanged with one a size lower. Worst of all, Naruto had timed it just before Kushina's return, so no one dared to respond for fear of her reaction. Naruto was practically the only one sympathetic to Minato's injuries. He hadn't genuinely meant to land the man in the hospital. It's okay, but I still don't understand why she was so angry, Minato stated when Naruto came to visit him, delivering reconciliatory instant ramen. Naruto could only shrug. He liked his mom, but she was pretty peculiar. It took Naruto several months to convince Kushina to do another mission. Worried about her infant boy, Kushina blitzed through it. At this point, a particular story about Konoha's Akagami started up, and came back a week early. She arrived to find Naruto's ANBU detail attempting to tie him up in a cocoon of ninja wire, and yank him away from his newest work. Long garlands of catnip, draping across one of Konoha's most popular retail streets, which had been taken over by a veritable sea of cats. The furry bulk was writhing and purring up a storm as the ANBU squad cursed and fought to keep grip of Naruto's bound, squirming body. Cats, ANBU and passers-by all halted as one, then turned slowly to confront the source of the deadly intent that had suddenly pressed on them. Kushina stood at the end of the street, her crimson hair flying. Mommy, Naruto shouted out enthusiastically, moving a little more. What, she said in the echoing voice of a wrathfully god, are you doing to my son? The ANBU's screams of utter terror were almost drowned out by the cat's yowling. Almost. Jiraiya giggled, peeping through a hole in the fence on the women's side of the bath. Yes, that's it. That's the stuff, sweetheart. He crowed beneath his breath. Show me those ripe fruit, those smooth, velvety mounds. What's another nice word? Bouncy, Naruto muttered, one cheek squeezed against the top of Jiraiya's head, his little hands holding the toad sage's unexpectedly soft white hair as he sat on the man's shoulders. Jiraiya nodded absently. Bouncy, fantastic term. Very descriptive, plenty of action. He whispered to himself. Blah. Naruto made a noise of disgust. I don't like big boobies. What? Jiraiya screamed, aghast, sitting up straight. How can you say that? What red-blooded male doesn't enjoy the wonder and grandeur that is a woman's huge, bouncy breasts? The sensation of squeezing that exquisite flesh bursting between your fingers. Flat and thin is excellent, Naruto declared. Like mommy and Sakura-chan. Jiraiya opened his mouth to remark something disparaging, only to freeze. Mommy, he murmured, coming out in cold sweat. He leaned back slowly, his eyes almost crossing as he tried to catch a sight of the toddler sitting on his shoulders. He'd been having a perverse argument with the youngster. I'll do anything, Naru-chan, Jiraiya said, swallowing heavily. Just forget the last 10 minutes and never, ever mention this to your mother. Teach me jutsu, Ero Senin. Naruto grinned as he feigned to think about it, just to make the super pervert sweat. It turned out quite well. He even got ramen for lunch as a result of it. In the middle of a task, Kushina paused and looked up. Her pupils squinted, and her long red hair moved uncomfortably. My mom's senses are tingling, she grumbled. Someone is doing something stupid to my baby, and I need to finish quickly. The screams of the bandits hiding in the bushes down the road were cut short. Minato, there's something strange about that kid, Jiraiya insisted, his face solemn. I know, Naruto is definitely unique, Minato said, not taking his gaze away from his paperwork. That's not it. Are you listening? Jiraiya exclaimed angrily. His strong tone eventually caused his old student to look up, concerned. I was on a team with Orochimaru. I taught you. I know what it looks like. That kid knew everything I was showing him. He already knew how to shape chakra. More than that, he already knew the Academy 3 and, get this, Kage Bunshin. Minato, he's only 2. Perhaps one of the ANBU, or Kushina. Minato started, but Jiraiya shook his head. I checked with all the squads you assigned to watch him, and I even told them they wouldn't get in punishment for it, but none of them taught him anything. Jiraiya insisted. That youngster knows a lot of stuff he shouldn't know. What are you saying, sensei? Minato inquired, his face solemn. Do you mean he's an imposter? That he's under someone's control? That the Kyuubi is influencing him? I'm not sure, Jiraiya said glumly, but something unusual is going on. He expected a variety of reactions from his student, most of which involved Naruto's denial, anger, or fear, but Minato only looked thoughtful for a moment. All right, he said calmly, I'll check the seal. That should resolve everything, right? If the seal and the Kyuubi are there, he can't be an imposter. I'll be able to see if there is any distortion in his chakra flow, and since I'll be using my own chakra, it will shatter any mind control tactics. And the Kyuubi? Jiraiya inquired. What Minato was saying sounded reasonable, but Jiraiya had a feeling none of the things he suggested were at work. It was something more profound and nuanced than that. Sensei, I was merely joking about it, Minato explained, surprised. That doesn't make sense. Why would a Biju no Kawarami? What would they swap with? A mountain? I need to check your seal. Naruto, Minato said over their normal instant ramen dinner. He'd done well to wait until Kushina was on another mission. Naruto raised his head, a long trail of noodles trailing from his mouth. He slurped them up loudly before asking, Akahae, how come? I wanted to ask the Kyuubi something, and I felt I might as well double-check everything because we weren't functioning in the best conditions that night, Minato explained. Naruto returned his ramen, shrugging in agreement. In the period between seconds, Kurama told him, You're a moron. The great fox sighed in frustration as Naruto made unhappy noises. You do know that no one in this world has ever told you about the seal or me. Naruto mumbled. Oops, he said, shrugging. Kurama waited expectantly, but Naruto didn't seem eager to explain. So, he finally inquired, How are we going to proceed? If he asks, we'll have to inform him, Naruto explained calmly. I'm not a good liar in the first place. And what if he doesn't ask? Kurama asked sarcastically. Naruto shrugged once again. It came as no surprise. That was the same careless technique they'd adopted with the other Jinchuriki. They still hadn't told them, especially Bee and Yagura, that Naruto wasn't the teenager he looked to be in the common space. Dealing with it had fallen to individual Biju, who were not exactly the most proactive of beings to begin with. Being ageless and essentially immortal had that impact. Kurama had a sneaking suspicion, though he didn't express it, that Naruto didn't want to cope with the ramifications from that revelation. Minato and Kushina were odd parents who didn't exactly treat their son according to his age. Kushina's peculiar brand of overprotection accepted, but Naruto didn't want them to treat him differently, to start looking at him as if he were a stranger. That was Naruto's dread, whether they would do it or not. If it was his wish, Kurama had always wanted Naruto to have the family he had been denied. He didn't mind if it meant lying to the Yondaime Hokage or whatever. Thankfully, Naruto and Kurama had decided to postpone tampering with the seal until later, partly because they had anticipated the possibility of a checkup, partly because they didn't have the key, and didn't want to improvise when there was no pressing need, and partly because there was no pressing need. With the seal in place, the chakra Kurama could give Naruto was slightly limited, but they didn't anticipate to undertake much intense fighting in the foreseeable future. It would have been too much for Naruto's little body, so there was no danger in waiting. The seal irritated Kurama, but it wasn't painful or even terribly unpleasant. As a result, when Minato studied the seal, he discovered nothing unusual. He appeared in the shared mental space before the Great Gates after inserting a bit of his chakra into its workings. "What do you want?" the Kyuubi asked, disinterested, none of it particularly phony. Minato didn't respond right away, instead looking about. He could have been studying his new surroundings, or he could have been searching for Naruto's mental self, who was currently hidden. Even when Minato finally faced the Kyuubi, he maintained a calm and even expression. Kurama was wary about that expression. How many people had the Yellow Flash murdered while wearing that same gleaming leader mask? The only thing Kurama knew was that the man didn't despise Naruto or the Kyuubi, but neither did the miniature root spies Danzu had placed up to spy on Naruto, as they learned when Naruto nearly tripped over them a few times. They were no less vicious or dangerous as a result. Instead of responding, Minato stated, "Naruto is your Jinchuriki. You consented to this, and he will be your shield against that disguised man." That was not what Kurama had anticipated. "Yes," he said. "For that purpose, it would be preferable if Naruto grows strong and is not influenced by anyone. Otherwise, your power would just become someone else's instrument," Minato said. "I see. So that's your approach?" Kurama said, finally grasping Minato's intent. "Protect my son, is that all? If he falls victim to a genjutsu, I can dispel it. If someone enters his mind, I can drive them out. If he's in danger, I can give him chakra. And the reason I should do so is for my own self-interest." Kurama considered Minato for a minute longer, thinking farther underneath the underneath, as they were fond of saying. "But is that all?" Kurama wondered. "It's not just that. I could tell Naruto things to turn him against the village, against you, but what would be the point? Humans are weak on their own. The more allies he has, the more people to stand between us and that man. Inflaming his rage and hatred would only harm me in the long run." "You've thought it through rather well," Minato replied, faintly smiling. "As one would expect from the greatest Biju." Kurama laughed. "You place a lot of faith in my intelligence. Have you ever considered that I might not be that wise? That's why I'm here, to see if you're the same as you were 2 years ago," Minato explained. "I'm not sure why you changed between being extracted from Kushina and being free of the masked man's control. But the you of after can see it clearly, and that's all I needed to know. Or else you'd take measures from your end, is that it? Tighten the seal. Invoke that woman's assistance in suppressing me," Kurama asked bitterly. Minato did not respond, but the Kyuubi knew he was correct. After all, an uncontrollable weapon is worse than worthless. Humans have always viewed the Biju as mere weapons. Despite his hatred for the Kyuubi and his reliance on its power, Naruto had never considered Kurama a weapon or a tool. On the other hand, I suppose humans see each other as tools as well. Naruto has never looked at anyone like that, Kurama reflected. A weapon you can't manage may kill everything you're attempting to defend, and then it's something better off hidden up forever, Minato explained. Yes, only hatred can flow from my power. I should simply stay deep in the seal forever. I heard that from Mito, that damn. Kurama grumbled, only to be cut short by Minato's following remarks. "However, I believe Naruto can manage even a deadly weapon and figure out how to wield it properly," the Yondaime concluded. "That's why I gave him your power, and why I'm giving him to you. That power will enable him to alter the world." Something about the comment struck Kurama as odd, and he continued to mull over it long after Minato had left, apparently satisfied. Kurama finally busted out laughing quite some time afterwards. Naruto was giving him strange mental looks, but Kurama didn't care. Your kid's going to change the world, so why not give him the best weapon to do so? Kurama pondered, still snickering. Or is it providing him the most powerful weapon to defend himself with? Haha, what a twisted way of thinking. Given Minato's complete trust in Naruto's ability to handle that power, and the 36 contingencies he'd probably placed somewhere in the seal just in case, it made a certain messed up kind of sense. It's appropriate for a shinobi. Didn't you buy your child the best kunai and teach them all your best jutsus? Despite the fact that both were dangerous in the hands of little genin brats, all to give them a better chance in the brutal ninja world. They would live longer if they were better armed. So why shouldn't the power of a Biju be an extension of that? Apparently, Minato thought so. I'm not sure if he's the most loving or the worst. Stupidest dad, Kurama murmured to himself. Larg, shut up. It's the middle of the night. I'm trying to sleep, shouted Naruto as he approached the cage. You silly furball, can't you lose your last screws in the morning? Shut up. Blame your foolish father, shouted Kurama back. Seriously, what kind of moron gave this brat the capacity to level mountains? However, the Sage of Six Paths had given him half the power of a god, so Naruto, being a complete moron, hadn't even realized he'd lost Kurama's ability to perceive bad emotions since being reborn in the past. Kurama had purposely severed that part of their connection and withheld that capacity. Naruto had already been accepted as a hero and was on the battlefield when he first learned to control the Kyuubi's chakra. But, back in Naruto's childhood village, Kurama feared that even Naruto would be overwhelmed by the people-deep, persistent dread and loathing. When Naruto was younger, it was like a strangling miasma, though Kurama, intoxicated on his own anger, hadn't been touched. Naruto had only gotten to genin through huge amounts of denial, and genuinely feeling the villagers' unmistakable and ever-present negativity. Well, that wouldn't be healthy for his mental condition. However, to Kurama's surprise, it wasn't the same. Of course, some people still despised them. Kurama's initial rampage had claimed many lives, and even knowing that the Biju had been used didn't take away the pain of those who had lost loved ones. However, their numbers had plummeted, and they were no longer the majority, but rather a minority of the population. The anxiety remained, but Naruto was so little, so loud, and so annoying that as soon as he came, every other emotion was drowned out by sheer fury. Naruto was an expert at aggravating people. Kurama had always thought Naruto was a moron for insisting on instilling those feelings in individuals he admired. But it all made sense now. That annoyance was created on Naruto's terms, through his activities, and it could be addressed on his terms, via his acts, unlike blind hatred and terror. Even though it seemed counterintuitive, going from village outcast to village idiot was a step up. That didn't mean Kurama was going to give Naruto bad emotion sensing anytime soon. Naruto, unlike Kurama, would be unable to reason logically through the people feelings, or to look at those emotions with bland detachment. Oh, everyone was scared for their life, Kurama observed. He had been keeping an eye on the mob chasing Naruto, who had daubed Ika Ika Paradise spoilers over the Hokage monument the day the book was released. However, the near-murderous rage and irritation quickly evolved to panic and crippling fear with a dash of religious zeal. That could only indicate one of two things. I suppose Kushina has returned, and she was close behind them, questioning what they were doing to her son. Yes, Naruto, the sympathetic little brat, had no reason to sense negative emotions. Naruto, Kurama reasoned, wouldn't be sadistic enough to understand the audience's shock at the sight of red hair flailing madly. Jiraiya realized his days were numbered in the middle of a release day book signing. When Naruto was 3, the peace treaty with Kumo was finalized and ready to be signed, after years of discussions. Despite hearing a lot about it, especially from Minato and Kushina's harsh cursing, Naruto didn't think much of it. That is, until he learned that the Hyuga heiress's birthday would coincide with the signing. Then it clicked, and Naruto had his first temper tantrum, which his parents vividly remembered. Naruto had not been a particularly obedient child, but he had never cried, and if he had ever desired something or disagreed with his parents, he had simply gone behind their backs and obtained it for himself. Minato and Kushina consented to have Naruto visit the Hyuga compound on Hinata's birthday, and spend the night there more out of sheer amazement than anything else. It was especially enigmatic because, up until that point, everyone assumed Naruto had no idea who Hinata was. If they had met, no one knew when or how. Hinata had never left the compound before. Your son isn't here. I was hoping to meet him and your wife, the Kumo head ninja casually observed on the day of the signing. It was a good thing Kushina had agreed to leave the village for the occasion, ostensibly in case Kumo attempted another abduction, but mostly because Minato didn't want a dead diplomat because the foreign shinobi couldn't stop himself from making subtly threatening remarks. Minato gave a flat smile. I was excited to see Ya and his brother again, he replied. And it wasn't some no-name grunt like you. The head ninja's expression trembled in response to the jab. Then they both returned to the crowd, putting on their finest public appearance global peace faces. The things I go through for the sake of my dear folks, Naruto grumbled internally. Kurama snorted in his head. Hey, I'll tell you what, this kimono is quite uncomfortable. How do people go around in these things? At least the formal attire was a bright, lively orange with lighter yellow patterns and dashes of white. It stood out among the Hyuga's whites, blacks, and browns. Hinata's faint lavender was the only other splash of color. Hina-chan, on the other hand, was adorable. Naruto was a guy, but he wanted to kaya and cuddle the Hyuga heiress, who was a cutie. Even Neji agreed that she was adorable. Speaking of Neji, I will not fail, Naruto thought to himself, even if it meant having to put up with all the boring, stuffy Hyuga elders and wearing stiff, scratchy formal attire. However, by the evening, it was only Naruto's love for his buddies that kept him from spilling some type of muck into every silky head of dark hair in sight, and dyeing all their garments bright pink. Naruto's patience was tested to the breaking point, and he began acting like a cranky toddler. I want to sleep next to Hina-chan, Naruto pleaded, his lower lip outstretched. Hinata clung to his sleeve, blushing. The Hyuga caregivers exchanged glances. They were clearly debating whether to face the Hyuga elders' old-fashioned propriety complaints, or the unhappiness of the Hokage's son, who had once driven the entire cryptology department to tears and the ANBU to murderous rage and deathly fear, respectively. The Hyuga shook his head. The decision was easy, the elders were always nagging anyway. When they were in bed, Hinata fell asleep soon, clutching Naruto's carrot-patterned pajamas with one hand and her thumb in her mouth with the other. But Naruto sat silently vigil and meditated. His innate, as in, like a part of nature, quiet meant that the abductor was utterly caught off guard when he softly ducked into the room. Naruto opened his eyes, his pupils square and sideways, and he and the masked invader stared at each other in silence. The kidnapper was stunned, but Naruto had a different problem. His first instinct was to attack, but his second instinct told him that was a terrible idea. Hinata was right next to him, and Naruto doubted his ability to protect her. Naruto instead opened his mouth to scream. The kidnapper lunged forward, his hand clamped over his mouth. Naruto flailed, irritated that he was becoming overpowered even in sage mode. This was a jounin he was wrestling with, or trying to wrestle with and failing, who had been chosen to enter a compound of a clan known for their hand-to-hand combat. The invader breathed a sigh of satisfaction after finally pinning Naruto. It was too soon. Hinata, who was standing next to them, scrunched up her nose and slowly opened her eyes. She locked her gaze on the intruder and Naruto, who returned her gaze. She screamed and opened her mouth. The kidnapper lacked the necessary hands to cover her mouth as well. Instead, he ran like a powerful, vengeful clan was on his tail, cursing but being completely drowned out by Hinata's high-pitched scream. That they were. Naruto was taken aback when he discovered himself being carried over the man's shoulder like a sack of rice. This was not in the plan. Worse, the head ninja was actually quite fast. He had been chosen for a purpose, after all. He was out of the facility and then out of the Byakugan's average range in no time. The enraged, confused yells only beginning behind them. Wait a minute, what? No, I'm not going to Kumo. I'm more bewildered than frantic, Naruto thought. Naruto ignored Kurama's mutterings about lending him some chakra or even biting the head ninja's head off. For a variety of reasons, drawing on the Kyuubi was a last option. Instead, Naruto drew his father's kunai. Oddly shaped and dull as it was nonetheless a weapon. He intended to stab the Kumo nin with it and then flee in the pandemonium. Instead, Minato came almost literally on top of them, appearing both calm and murderous. After that, it was over in an instant, in a flash, if you will. I won't tell your mom if you don't, Minato murmured, snatching Naruto from the Kumo head ninja's loose grip. Naruto just nodded absent-mindedly. Oh, he reflected, so that's why mom fell in love with him. Despite being an unreliable sissy boy, as Kushina lovingly put it, though only around her and occasionally Jiraiya. It should be noted, Minato acted with almost unnatural calm and logic in combat. He could quickly analyze almost any situation and act without hesitation to take the best objective course of action. So, even while rescuing his 3-year-old son, Minato retained his calm enough to just knock out the Kumo envoy, rather than killing him as any other parent would. Not to imply Minato wasn't as enraged as any other father. No one knew what was in the letter he sent to the Reikage, but it had paled considerably when he read it, leaving him speechless for several minutes. Kumo then slunk away, its tail between its legs. Minato thought his response was very gracious. If Kushina had dealt with them, there would have been only 4 magnificent secret settlements left. He was probably correct in his assessment. In fact, the two most significant outcomes of Kumo's attempted kidnapping were 1. Hyuga Hinata's enormous overprotective crush on Naruto, which, one might think, is par for the type, except for the part where Hinata was clearly totally confident that Naruto needed to be protected and set out to grow strong enough to do so, and 2. Naruto's awareness that, while he couldn't fight much himself, he had parents who could. On order, one of them could teleport to Naruto's location. This is a terrible idea, don't even think about it, Kurama snarled. It's a fantastic idea, Naruto objected. Think about it. I don't have to wait years and years to be strong enough to take on all these S-rank jerks, and I don't have to worry about explaining why I know they're wicked. It's ideal. Being kidnapped can never be a smart plan, Kurama insisted. And they're all creeps who prey on children, so they'll make it easy for me, Naruto added, completely disregarding Kurama's advice. The Biju groaned. When he got like this, there was no hope for him. Whether he liked it or not, Naruto was going to be kidnapped. Orochimaru was the most terrifying kidnapper Naruto had ever encountered, so he decided to begin there. Naruto wasn't sure how it all started, but he knew Orochimaru was still in the village, and while he didn't have any special bloodline, Naruto felt reasonably certain that he could bait Orochimaru with something. The Kyuubi's chakra, the kenjutsu he wasn't supposed to know, the truth about the world that still sounded kind of ridiculous, or even his own excessive knowledge about Orochimaru's own. In fact, Orochimaru had defected 2 years before Naruto was born. He had fallen behind schedule. The explanation was straightforward. As much as Orochimaru despised Namikaze Minato, he recognized the Yondame's might and ruthlessness. Unlike Sarutobi, Orochimaru felt the need to be meticulous in all parts of his investigation. This included the research that had led to his capture and expulsion from the village. That same caution made it difficult for Naruto to carry out his plan, which stalled at the first hurdle, identifying and communicating with Orochimaru. Naruto decided to use his Hokage father and began hanging around Minato's office because he was already planned to exploit his parents for all they were worth. He reasoned that even Orochimaru would have to come in for missions at some point. Except Orochimaru didn't show up for weeks. Minato eventually decided enough was enough. "Are you on the lookout for something, Naruto?" he inquired. Naruto gave him a thoughtful look. "I'm looking for this snake person," he finally answered, mentally shrugging his shoulders. "I saw him once and he looked really cool, and he had a headband, so I thought he'd come in for missions sometime, but he hadn't," Naruto exclaimed internally. Minato listened intently through the entire run-on statement. "I see," he said. "A snake guy. That must be Orochimaru. Jiraiya teammate. Sensei's he's been out of the village. But tell you what, when he returns, I'll introduce you to." "Excellent," exclaimed Naruto. "I hope Sensei doesn't find out about this," Minato thought as his son ran away. His unidentified mission resumed. Minato exhaled a sigh. His office would be a lot more boring without Naruto in it. Not that his workers would see it negatively. They were sick of the coffee machines randomly switching to decaf, cocoa, or gravy. "Nice to meet you," Naruto said courteously. It was difficult not to guffaw at the words. "Quite," Orochimaru murmured, leaning away from the youngster quietly. "I heard you know a lot of great jutsus," Naruto replied, his voice as innocent as a tiny kid. He grabbed Orochimaru's pant leg and looked up at him with huge blue eyes. "Can you teach me some, please? I want more power." Orochimaru wanted to hear, right. At least, that's what his subordinates were always saying. Of course, coming from a supposed 3-year-old, it sounded odd. Orochimaru looked at Minato, who was staring at them with a calm, utterly useless expression. Orochimaru's refined shinobi instincts were confident that someone was attempting to lead him into a trap, but he couldn't figure out what the trap was. "Please," pleaded Naruto, who was now firmly hooked to Orochimaru's leg. There would be no way out. Naruto reasoned that he would have to bring out the big guns. He tightened his grip. "I think snakes are cool, even cooler than..." Naruto swallowed bile, then toads. Well. Orochimaru cast another nervous glance at Minato, who was still smiling blandly. Nonetheless, Orochimaru felt as if a noose was tightening around his neck. Jiraiya would be furious at the thought of his godson preferring snakes to his prized toads. Was Jiraiya's student the same as mine? No matter how mild-mannered and polite Minato looked, Orochimaru definitely remembered seeing the aftermath of a 1,000-man Iwa invading force going against the Yellow Flash. Only one shinobi survived the combat, and it wasn't an Iwa nin. Perhaps later, Orochimaru mumbled with an uneasy smile. "Get moving, little boy." He tried shaking Naruto off his leg without success, and had to resort to a quick snake transformation, in which he no longer had any legs at all, to not escape, because he wasn't running from a 3-year-old, But a strategic relocation. Hokage-sama, Orochimaru acknowledged, quickly closing the office door behind him. TCH, Naruto clicked his tongue, a childish expression of thwarted displeasure on his face. He's not getting away that easily, he declared, his eyes narrowing. Minato called after Naruto as he exited through the window. Make sure you keep my kunai on you. All right, Naruto replied. Orochimaru, being a Sannin, could readily tell when he was being followed. Well, Naruto wasn't trying in any case. Orochimaru would turn and glare at the tiny feet sticking out from under a store sign or a camouflage cloth being clumsily held up whenever he saw a flash of gold or orange out of the corner of his eyes. It was also obvious even an academy student could see it. Theoretically, that made sense since the brat trailing him wasn't even an academy yet. But no matter what he didn't, Orochimaru couldn't lose him. Circling, mingling with crowds, ducking into narrow, twisty alleys, hiding his presence, or even running didn't help. The same flash of color in the corner of his eye, followed by a terrible attempt to hide. Worse, everyone else could see what was going on, and the villagers kept looking at him with a mixture of suspicion and sympathy. Even Orochimaru couldn't stand it any longer. Stop following me, you brat, he cried, swinging around and pointing to the tips of yellow hair showing from behind a Tanuki mascot statue in a shop. But you haven't yet shown me your snake. Naruto objected. You said you would. No, I didn't, growled Orochimaru. Naruto was unfazed. If Orochimaru didn't want to hire him because of his alleged ambition and hunger for power, Naruto would have to find another way to pique his interest. As Naruto's eyes narrowed, Orochimaru felt an unexplainable shudder run down his spine. Is it because we aren't in your secret location? Naruto inquired. He reasoned that Orochimaru had to have a slew of secret hideouts. Let's go there and just the two of us. Orochimaru let out a choking sound. I want your mark as well, Naruto insisted, going all in. In exchange, I'll give you my body. Now he has to kidnap me in order to keep me from revealing all of his secrets. Naruto triumphantly thought. Either that or murder him, Naruto reasoned, but kidnapping would still come first. Naruto understood at this point that Kurama had buried his snout between his paws and was making strange noises. The entire street was silent, staring at them. Then the wild whispers began. Show him his snake, in a secluded area where they'll be alone. Give him his mark in exchange for his body. But that's not fair. Orochimaru, to the son of the Hokage. I've always thought he looked suspicious, like a creeper, a horrible kind of pervert. Someone dashed off to call the police. Someone dashed off to find the Hokage. Orochimaru turned around and ran. Or, at the very least, he attempted. Naruto was quicker, leaping at the man and wrapping his arms around his waist. Don't leave me, he exclaimed. The next thing Naruto knew, he was holding a nearby Tanuki statue instead, as Orochimaru made a hasty departure with a deft kawarami. But not before Naruto snuck Minato's kunai into his weapon pouch. In retrospect, racing directly to one of his hidden labs was not a wise choice, but Orochimaru had been completely taken off guard and his sole thinking had been hide. The safer the area, the better. He had no idea Namikaze Minato would emerge next to him in a blaze of yellow light. Minato had not anticipated it either. He had expected to see his son, hopefully in the middle of a public street, as per a somewhat perplexing story. Instead, he witnessed several things that were almost certainly forbidden or, at the least, unapproved by the Hokage, and he would know because he was the Hokage in issue. When Minato asked Orochimaru a courteous question, the snake Sannin had already transformed into a snake and was crawling away. He would have monologued at Sarutobi. Doing so with the yellow flash was just begging for a Rasengan surprise. Minato was horribly pragmatic and lacked a sense of the dramatic, despite being Jiraiya's student. Naruto was upset, but not shocked, to learn that Orochimaru had escaped. He was sneaky like that. But as far as Naruto was concerned, his scheme was a big success, if not precisely as he imagined. Kurama merely groaned a bit and muttered something about not even bothering anymore. Despite what Naruto imagined, his dreadfully wrong attempts at provocation aside, Orochimaru was never going to kidnap him, no matter what Naruto did. Because Orochimaru had a strong sense of self-preservation and understood that witnessing the yellow flash on a warpath to recover his only child was not something he wanted to, or would survive witnessing. To kidnap the Hokage's son, you'd have to be a complete moron or extremely arrogant. Fortunately for Naruto, his next target was another arrogant, short-sighted jerk. Danzo even made things simple for Naruto by approaching him on his own. Technically, Danzo attempted to recruit Naruto into his secret army, but as Naruto was still a minor, this was effectively kidnapping. Like a genuine shinobi, to guard our town from the shadows," the old man scolded, as Naruto nodded along with his recruitment pitch. "That is root, those that maintain the great tree of Konoha. And I feel that you, Naruto, have the ability to become one of." "Okay," Naruto replied, cutting through Danzu's long-winded explanation. "I'll join. Joining would be so wonderful. Please let me be in your secret club, Jai." Danzu-sama." Danzu twitched a little at having his organization referred to as a club, but pushed through with tenacity almost equal to Naruto's. "Excellent, my boy," he said, his smile disturbing rather than encouraging. "Come with me, and I'll show you where you'll be trained, but let's keep this between us a secret so you can surprise your father with your progress." "Sure, I'm not going to tell him anything," Naruto exclaimed, pleased. Everything is going as planned, they both thought. "Kill me now," Kurama thought to himself in the depths of Naruto's mind. "If he tries to seal Naruto, I'm going to burn out his other eyeball." Hyuga Hinata had spent the first 3 years of her childhood isolated from all except the closest relatives of her family inside the clan complex. But the fact that the individuals who surrounded her were close family didn't imply they were kind. No, Hinata's life was cold and empty, punctuated by harsh training that drove her even deeper into herself. On her birthday, everything changed. There was a bright spot of color among the distant, untouchable figures of her clan. The odd outsider lad grinned and took her hand in his. He was really friendly, polite, and cheerful. A ray of sunshine in her otherwise cloudy existence. A sunflower and a sunbeam. Naruto is a ninja. Hinata was quickly smitten. Hinata felt truly content and full for the first time in her memory as she went to bed that night, Naruto's hand in her own. Then, in the middle of the night, she awoke to see a masked stranger dragging Naruto away. Hinata screamed, not in fear, as Naruto had assumed, but in pure rage, the kind she hadn't realized she was capable of. How could he? Was all she could think. She tossed her pillow, a little hard block in the customary style, at the masked invader, but he dodged and vanished, along with Naruto. Her sunshine and warmth boy was quickly returned by his father, but Hinata realized something crucial. Naruto was valuable and needed to be protected, or she would be left alone and freezing once more. And to protect Naruto, Hinata needed to get much stronger. Hayashi wasn't completely sure what to make of his daughter's unexpected turn to ruthlessness at their next training session. When she forcefully pulled out her opponent's knee and stomped on his fingers while he flailed in pain. But he thought it was an improvement. Sort of. Hayashi was so perplexed by Hinata's new combat mindset, which was almost like a split personality because she still acted shy and demure otherwise, that he completely missed the other change in her behavior, her new hobby of stalking, observing Naruto. Hinata's natural wallflower mood and lack of presence allowed her to simply slip out of the facility, even under the guard's Byakugan. As she shamelessly spied on Danzu's meeting with Naruto, she was able to fly under the radar of even Danzu's paranoia. She couldn't follow them into the mysterious tunnels Danzu led Naruto to, a root base, since her Byakugan couldn't see deep enough. That simply meant she needed a better Byakugan. Ku attempted to protest at first. Then, Hinata turned to him with the same expression she had given to the 2 seniors she had almost crippled and the 3rd she had almost castrated. And he concluded it would be best to merely obey his future clan chief. Here, Hinata replied, having taken him to one of the most forlorn portions of the settlement. "Use your Byakugan and tell me what you see below." "It appears like there's tunnels," Ku remarked slowly, focusing on his increased vision. "And shinobi training. I saw Naruto-sama, his chakra is quite distinct. And over there." Ku fell deafeningly silent. "I think we need to notify the Hokage right away," he finally said. It would be bad enough if the Hokage's son was taken to a secret training facility without his parents' permission. But Danzu had another crucial guest that day. "What do you mean? The Namikaze brat is here," Orochimaru growled, his hands gripping periodically. "Is it not obvious? I am taking efforts to control the greatest weapon of the future generation," Danzo said coolly, not in the least concerned by his once subordinate's frenzy. "His bloodline alone would guarantee a great tool, but if I can attain the Kyuubi's strength, Konoha will have no equivalent," he pondered. To Orochimaru, Danzu said scornfully, "Do try to keep your impulses under control. I've never done anything to that tiny creature. I'd never even seen him before that day," protested Orochimaru. "And do you really believe you can pull that off behind Namikaze's back? He's dangerous." Danzu brushed off his misgivings. "That upstart is in a meeting with several clans for the rest of the day, not to be disturbed. And he regularly lets his brat run around the village with no supervision," Danzu said, adding to the so-called war hero's folly. "I'll make sure not to cause a scene and that I hide my tracks carefully." Besides which, I invested quite a bit of effort into inventing a seal to interfere with Tobirama Haration. Sama's even if he tried to teleport to his son's side while the boy is here, it wouldn't work, Danzu mused. Well, at least he hoped so. There hadn't really been much chance to test it. In any case, the meeting the Hokage was so preoccupied with featured the Hyuga clan prominently, and Hayashi was more than prepared to pause the proceedings to hear what his daughter had to say about a hidden organization beneath the city that had supposedly captured Naruto. Throughout the explanation, Minato remained quiet and expressionless. I see. Thank you for informing me, Hinata-chan. Leave it to me, he murmured, exchanging a sympathetic look with the Hyuga heiress. It was frightening. Root had been disbanded by the end of the day, and its commander was in arrest for a number of questionable behaviors, including abduction, illicit experimentation, and collaboration with a known fugitive. Orochimaru still managed to escape away though. When Naruto awoke, his first thought was, wow, this is so embarrassing. I assume I was abducted. All indicators led to that, especially the fact that he was tied up and being carried over the shoulder of a foreign shinobi speeding away from Konoha. Wasn't that your entire plan? Kurama murmured in their shared mental realm. That's different, exclaimed Naruto. This wasn't planned. I wasn't expecting to be kidnapped by some. Who are these men again? Iwa, sighed Kurama. Right, some Iwa losers. I can't believe they caught me off guard like that. He mumbled to himself. And you, how come you didn't warn me? Kurama shrugged, then yawned sharply and turned away. It was mostly because he had slept off. Naruto's life was honestly monotonous, in between periods of sheer lunacy. You know, you could take this a little more seriously, Naruto grumbled. Aren't these folks supposed to despise my father? Who knows what they'll try to do to me? I guess they even stole my father's kunai. Despite his statements, he didn't appear too concerned. You'll be fine, Kurama told him, dozing asleep once more. She'll be here in a minute, and she's furious. Yes, Kushina's approach was obvious, considering the waves of homicidal intent she was emitted. Even in the absence of the Kyuubi's negative emotion sense, the poor Iwanins began to feel cold sweat run down their necks by instinct. Then a crimson demon materialized in front of them. In retrospect, they had been concerned about the wrong parent. Minato arrived a few minutes later, utilizing the seal still on Kushina. That was the first time anyone from Iwa was ever happy to see the yellow flash. They were extremely pleased. The yellow flash should not be underestimated, one of the Uchiha clansmen warned during a covert coup planning session. Perhaps if we had something to hold against him, like his son, someone said. He promptly retracted his suggestion after a moment of contemplative silence. They didn't want to go there at all. There was nothing excellent in that direction.
This was it for today. I will continue the story in next part. Till then, we weeb offline.